Covered some of this earlier, but just in line with the going back to the Brisbane Airport noise issue, are you able to provide the sod drops data to us for both day and night time operations in a spreadsheet format for the Brisbane Airport since the last estimates?
Yes, we can, Senator.
And just to be clear, I'd need the date. That should include the dates, the number of sod drops flights, and hours of operation of sod drops as well. Have we? And I'm not quite up to speed with where things are at, but have the flight paths in Brisbane changed to this new model, which is apparently based on what happens in Heathrow and all those and all that work that was done in the last year or so?
Senator, thank you. There's been a range of changes made to the way that we operate Brisbane airspace throughout the course of 2023. I'd characterise those as being toward the minor end of the spectrum. As I was saying before to Senator Rice, we've got packages that we're working through in different timeframes. Substantial flight path changes are planned for this year. They were consulted on through last year, and we've now reached a point where we're at a preferred set of options which we're working forward. And just to give you some sense of the kind of changes we're looking at, predominantly this is moving flights where we can over water to give respite to communities that are affected by the southerly departure direction. And so one of the things we've had to consult on is where flight paths then return back over land in the Redland area and to understand the impacts on those communities. We're looking at a range of options. There's 6 in total. We're working through those with communities and industry through the course of this year. And in general terms, we've got a series of criteria that will see reduction in total population overflight, a reduction in the population impacted by 70 decibel corridors, 60 decibel corridors, and also trying to strike the right balance with the increase in track miles that airlines will have to fly and the consequent additional costs for fuel, which ultimately gets passed through to passengers, and of course the additional CO2. So we're looking to strike the right balance with these kinds of changes and nevertheless implement them through the course of 2024.
So the broader changes, you're still going to make these changes where you sort of randomise the flight paths or some such? I thought that's where we're heading towards. Have I described that right?
Senator, I'm having difficulty with that. Randomising the flight paths isn't necessarily a part of what we're...
So you're not going to do that? I thought that was what was decided.
We're looking to noise share wherever we can. There's a number of ways you can noise share. You can noise share through runway mode usage. You can noise share through having multiple flight paths, or you can noise share similar to how we have in Sydney. And we're not proposing to do that, given that is older technology, older navigation technology. So we're looking to identify ways that we can better noise share through runways and flight path design.
So the flight path design element, that doesn't include using different flight paths to get to and from the Brisbane Airport,
that was
like they do at Heathrow.
That was one of the... We consulted community on some specific scenarios around that, and there was not support for a specific example of noise sharing in that way. We think, nevertheless, there may be some support if we do it in different ways, and that would be part of the package 3 that I mentioned previously. And that would not be due for implementation until 2025.
Till 2025, right.
Correct, Senator.
Thanks, taking a while. With the runway thing, is this using like the full length of the runway or some such? Is that what this is?
Senator, there was a trial undertaken for about 18 months through the course of last year in 2022 where we looked to use the full length of the runway. The findings of that were that there was a negligible benefit to community, less than 1 decibel, which is generally accepted as being imperceptible. And so that trial has been discontinued, given that it comes at additional cost in terms of airport capacity and the way that we operate the airfield generally. So it was giving no benefit and coming at a cost.
Right, okay. You did mention, though, that flight use of the runway is one element of what you could do. So are there other ways of using the runway to reduce noise, and what are those?
Certainly, Senator, and if I were to reflect on other ways of designing flight paths, if I reflect on the 6 options that we're taking forward, we'll be implementing some of them this year. Will not be all 6. Some of them are mutually exclusive. Others can coexist. The sorts of scenarios we're looking at, Senator, are working through an assessment criteria that looks at potential overflown reduction from 80,310 residents today to 47,498. So about half of the current number of residents that are overflown, reducing the number of those that are exposed to higher decibel flight corridors. But, as I said, that comes at a trade-off with increasing track miles. In the case of this particular option that I'm referring to, it looks to increase track miles by only a marginal amount, a couple of additional miles, but that will come at additional fuel burn and cost to airlines and passengers.
What's the track mile?
A track mile is the miles that the aircraft
flies. Right. It's not on the runway per se.
No, airborne, and it's
Just bring it back. What are the other runway options? Or is it only using a full length?
Well, we explored using the full length, and then it comes down to our mode utilisation. And so runway modes, are where we look to use modes like sod props, which we mentioned before, the simultaneous opposite direction. Essentially, that's arriving and departing over water. That's the most preferred mode in terms of noise impact on the Brisbane community.
And that increases your track miles then?
It may do, Senator. We're looking to use that more often. One of the challenges we have with that, it is a relatively low capacity mode. We can't use it during very busy times, and so we're looking to see how we can get better at using that so that we can use it more often when the airfield is busier.
You gave some data on what you expect to generate, I think, from reduced number of residents impacted, reduced number of residents at particularly high decibels. What's the figures so far? I mean, through the measures that you've implemented, what has been the reduction in the number of residents?
The measures that we've implemented so far are focused around the use of that sod props mode. And so what we've sought to do is to use that as much as we can on weekends, into the evenings, commencing earlier in the evening, wherever weather and traffic safety conditions permit, and using it further into the mornings over the weekends as well. And so we've made that permanent, and so we now permanently operate from 8 a.m. on a Saturday and Sunday morning, and we commence those operations from 8 p.m. on a Saturday night.
That wasn't quite my question. The question is, those things you've implemented, what's the impact been? How many fewer residents are now impacted by noise in Brisbane?
So the impact is different to the impacts I just described where we're changing a flight path. If I'm moving a flight path from one location to another, I can very carefully assess the overflown area and understand the residents that are underneath that. When I'm using a runway mode, I'm going from a time that I might have otherwise overflown Brisbane to a time where I'm now, Brisbane City, to a time where I'm now overflowing the water. So in a sense, it's
but aren't they still not impacted? I mean, what I'm asking, well, number one, these people are my constituents, and it does come up, and I want to be able to tell them this is what we've done, and we've reduced the impact by X%, or there's now X thousand fewer people impacted, or some metric. That's all I want. I'm not asking how it's done. I'm asking about the results, and if we can't describe the results, how can we hold anybody accountable here for what's going on?
Senator, perhaps the best answer I can give is that where we're designing flight path changes, we can give the metrics that I've just talked through. Where we're talking about mode utilisation, it's quite binary, where it's 1 or 0. It is now we're operating over water, which is no longer operating over land. So the outcome is very beneficial to the Brisbane community for those hours that we've extended and made permanent.
Yeah, but can't you generate an estimate of how many fewer hours people have had, for how many people have had noise over them? I don't understand how are we benchmarking this?
Yes, I can give you
I don't know exactly what the metric should be, but I would have thought there'd be some measure here that you want to benchmark and say this many people for this amount of time were impacted previously, and now because of what we've done, we've achieved a reduction in X amount.
So Senator, I think perhaps to convert these into percentages might be more
Right,
meaningful
that's
for committee
whatever
members,
you-
but the
yep.
data I have to share with you
Yep.
today is the total minutes that it's been available that we've used sod props,
Right.
the change I was talking about, was 27,132 for the second half of last calendar year. So those are sort of meaningful metrics that we can give to communities. We can also give those by time of day, daytime, evening and nighttime. And typically we find in engagement with communities, there's more sensitive hours obviously than others, and they're very interested in those kinds of details as well. We do publish this data on our website on a quarterly basis.
So by those who are saying 27,000 hours you've used these sod drops,
Yes.
would they, am I right to say those 27 hours previously, that's over a year, is it?
It's over 6 months from June to
6 months.
December 2023. So
Okay. Would, if without the use of these sod drops, would those 27,000 hours have been flying over people's houses?
Senator, I don't think we can just draw that straight conclusion. We have had sod props in use. We've sought to use it more, and so there's probably another level of detail that we need to provide you on notice.
Well, I'm just trying to assess,
Understand.
what we've done, or what the impact. So that doesn't work either. Anyway, maybe you could take that on notice. Can we get an estimate of what has been the impact of the changes on people living in Brisbane? That's what people want.
Yeah.
And I want to
Yes,
try
we
and
can
deliver it
provide-
for them, but I'm struggling to see how any of what we've done is maybe it was 27,000 before the changes. So maybe there's been no change. I don't know. What was the sod drop?
No, we've certainly increased.
You said you used sod drops before. So what was sod drops for the 6 months the year earlier?
Senator, the change that we introduced last year was we made permanent the extension of the hours in which we use sod props whenever the weather permits. We made changes to include sod props operations from 8 p.m. on a Saturday until 8 a.m.
But for the 6 months, so that was 6 months late last year, was it? You gave me?
From June to December, Senator.
2023?
Yes, Senator.
So what was it for the 6 months in 2022, second half of 2022?
Senator, we'll have to take that on notice.
And can you get me the last, get me going back to 2019 before COVID?
Yes.
Because
Yeah.
obviously once we get too far back we'll start getting the COVID period. So can you get me 2019, the last 6 months of 2019 and then going forward?
Senator, I can't go earlier than the runway opening, which was in July 2020, because we weren't using that mode of operation.
Yeah, right.
prior to that.
We're
But
going
I can
to
go
have
back
some issue
to
with
I can go
COVID,
back to
but-
runway opening in July
Yeah.
2020.
Yeah. Okay. All right, because it's still coming up as an issue, that's all. All right, thank you. Well, looks like I'm chair now, so